All right, so we're going to come back to angels in a minute, but here's the point I want us to see first, and this is a really important point in the film and in life, and that is sometimes life is so hard we think we can't go on. Sometimes life seems so hopeless, we feel such despair or depression, such darkness that we think life would be better, the world would be better, everyone else would be better if we were not here. Now, you may not have thought of it in those terms, but I'm guessing every single one of us have moments where we feel hopeless or we feel utter despair or deep depression or utter darkness. We all have those times. And when I was listening to George Bailey's prayer, God, show me the way. I'm not a praying man, but please, God, show me the way. And he sees nothing. He hears nothing in that moment. All he can fixate on is the fact that he's got a life insurance policy that will pay out if he goes and jumps off the bridge. And that's what he proceeds to head to do. And as I think about that, I think about my grandmother who took her own life when my mom was 16 years old. And my mom has told me multiple times that my grandmother, what she was praying is, God, show me the way, show me the way. And then my grandmother's suicide letter indicates that she felt like all of the children would be better off if she were no longer here. And so she thought she was doing something that would help them. When we find ourselves in such darkness, we have a tunnel vision and we can't see clearly. Our vision is skewed. We can't see clearly and we find ourselves thinking things that are not true. We can't see that there will be light someday. The darkness will not last forever. And part of the reason I wanted us to focus on this for a few moments, and part of the reason why I think this film is such a classic at Christmas time, is because everyone has felt this. And as you have felt this somewhere along the way in your life, I want you to remember what Scripture promises us, that the darkness does not last forever. That pain and brokenness and despair don't last forever. They may last for a season. We might have months or sometimes longer than that where we're walking through this dark place, but it does not last forever. The book of Job teaches the same thing. Job is going through hell on earth, great suffering, and his friends say, just curse God and die. But he refuses to do that. He says, I am going to trust in God no matter what. And you get to the end of the book of Job and you find that his life is restored and there's beauty and blessings that happen. And in our own lives, we see and experience that same thing. In our 32-year history as a church, there have been many times that I've walked with families and our pastors have walked with families through suicide. It's a terrible, terrible grief. What my grandmother couldn't see when she was writing that letter, what she thought was the best way out, she couldn't see the pain that would ripple through her children's life, who she dearly loved, but she couldn't see what would happen in their lives over the decades. Still to this day, the pain that is there from that loss that happened so long ago. And as we think about that, I have been with families, and I know that that parent or that child who took their own life, if they could only have seen what would happen to their loved ones after that, curled up in the fetal position, or the hopeless or the sobbing or the despair that they have experienced in the aftermath of that, but they couldn't see it. They thought they were doing the right thing or they were doing the helpful thing, but it was actually the thing that brought even more pain. And so this film deals with this in several different ways. It's going to address this question of utter despair and darkness. I want to remind you, George was a good man. He wasn't a bad man. He was a good man and felt hyper-responsible. And that led to in some ways, his thinking this way. I want you to know that George wasn't the only person that's famous who thought about taking his own life. If you look in the Bible, you're going to find again and again key biblical figures, heroes in the Bible who wanted their lives to end. So let me just remind you, there's Moses. And Moses has led the children of Israel out of Egypt and slavery, but he's not yet to the promised land. And there begins to be a group of people who don't want him to be their leader anymore. And he begins to feel overwhelmed with the opposition and the criticism. And he finally goes out in the wilderness and he says, God, just take me now. I don't want to live anymore. Please, just take my life. I don't want to do this anymore. I mean, this is Moses. But what he couldn't see is that was going to be resolved. And he was going to lead over the next 30 years. He was going to lead the children of Israel. So over a 40-year period after they'd been set free, but 30 years or so after his great conflict, he's going to lead them to the promised land. And he's going to have a chance to bless them as they go into the new land. And all of his best years are ahead of him, but he can't see that in the moment. And I think about King David. So there's King David, who is the greatest king of ancient Israel. And he writes many of the Psalms. And you remember many of those Psalms are complaint Psalms or lament Psalms, like Psalm 6:6. Listen to this. David writes, I'm worn out from groaning. Every night I drench my bed with tears. I soak my couch all the way through. My vision fails because of my grief. It's weak because of all of my distress. There are times he's ready to die in the Psalms, but God doesn't take his life in those moments. And what happens with David is all of his best years are ahead of him. He just couldn't see that in the moment. So he trusts God and he continues to go on. There was Elijah, one of the greatest prophets of ancient Israel. And you may remember that King Ahab and Queen Jezebel wanted to kill him. And so he goes fleeing to the wilderness. And then this is what we read. We read in Scripture, he longed for his own death. And he says this, it's more than enough, Lord. Take my life because I'm no better than my ancestors. So he sat down under a broom tree and he longed for his own death. Again, it's more than enough, Lord. Take my life because I'm no better than my ancestors. And yet what we find with Elijah is once more, all of his best years are ahead of him, but he can't see it in that moment. He can't see. And God won't take his life because God knows he's going to be okay in the end. Here's the thing about God is God knows what's going to happen in the future and can see that. And when it's your time and God wants, God says, okay, I need you now, it's done. He can do that. But generally speaking, he's going to say, you know what? There's a lot more living for you to do, a lot more life for you to live. And I want you to hear this. If you're somebody who's been thinking about suicide lately, or you have in the past, or you will sometime in the future, I want you to know this is not God's will for you. It is not God's will for you. He loves you. He wants to walk with you through the darkness. He understands the pain you're experiencing. He understands the people who have taken their own lives, your children or family members who have. He loves them. But what he wants to say to those of us who are living is, I've got ways to use you. I'm going to work through you. I'm going to carry you and sustain you. I know you can't feel it and it's darkness now, but the darkness will not last forever. And that's part of the Christmas message. So John's telling of the Christmas story we're going to come to on Christmas Eve at the candlelight service. Why we have candlelight at Christmas Eve is we remember John says that the light came into the darkness. Jesus is the light of the world. The light came into the darkness and the darkness could not overcome it. That's part of the promise of Christmas. I want to mention that if you are struggling with suicide or deep depression or despair, we have resources available for you. Of course, you can always call the church office. You can call the church, talk to one of our pastors. You have access to a whole lot of resources on our website. You can go to core.org/next, and you'll find a link there today. But if you're watching this sermon online, months down the road or years down the road, where I'd like for you to go is core.org/suicide. cor.org/suicide. It will take you to all those resources. Several sermons, a panel of experts. It'll take you to downloadable resources. You can have conversation with your family members if you think somebody else might be suicidal, that you can talk with them. There's the National Suicide Hotline. There's the National Text Hotline, where you can text if you choose to do that. If you aren't going to do any of those things, call 911. Just make the call, and there'll be somebody there, a voice there that will be able to help you. And so we just want you to know there are resources available. We want to help. There are others who want to help. You can make it through this. You really can. Trust in God, reach out to people, and you're going to find help.